The sky above Earth shifted in a way no one could explain. At first, it was a flicker of lights, like distant stars winking out of existence. Then the dark silhouettes of colossal ships began to appear, blocking out the sun in eerie silence. People stood frozen, staring up in disbelief, their hearts sinking with every passing second. The ships were unlike anything humanity had ever seen, sleek, imposing, with jagged edges and an ominous gleam that suggested advanced technology far beyond their own. From the edge of the Atlantic to the cities of the Far East, Earth's leaders scrambled to understand what was happening. News outlets flooded with images of the alien fleet, while governments worldwide tried to issue statements, though none had answers. Panic began to spread. Some countries locked down their borders, some tried to organize mass evacuations, but no one had a concrete plan to fight what was coming. The first transmission from the alien fleet came shortly after, a booming voice reverberating across the globe. It wasn't a language Earth had ever heard, but the tone was unmistakable. Authoritative, commanding, and cold. It wasn't until hours later that a translated message was broadcast. "We are the Xalrathi. Your species is now under our dominion. Surrender your world or face complete annihilation. You have 36 hours to comply." The words fell like a stone into the hearts of humanity. The silence that followed was deafening, and for a moment, it felt as if time itself had stopped. The sense of inevitability was overwhelming. How could Earth possibly defend itself against an alien race that spoke with such confidence? The entire planet was in a collective state of shock. Behind closed doors, world leaders convened in emergency meetings, but no one had answers. There were no deflector shields, no giant weapons in Earth's arsenal capable of even making a dent in the alien ships. Military experts and strategists were called upon to assess the situation, but all they could do was offer their apologies. The Xalrathi were simply too powerful. Across the globe, ordinary citizens grappled with the reality of the situation. Social media was flooded with videos of the ships in the sky, the once bustling streets now empty as people rushed to take shelter. But not everyone was afraid. Some, in the face of the impossible, looked up with curiosity rather than fear. They knew something fundamental about humanity that the invaders didn't. Humans had a way of surprising their enemies when pushed to the edge. And so, as Earth's leaders debated surrender, a new hope began to stir in the most unexpected places. Those who had seen this kind of thing before, in books and stories, and in the very spirit of humanity itself. The next step, they knew, was to prove that humanity wouldn't go down without a fight. In the aftermath of the alien transmission, panic swept through government halls. Yet in the chaos, a few individuals recognized something critical: the Xalrathi's arrogance. Earth may not have the advanced technology to match the aliens, but humans had something far more powerful: ingenuity. The moment was ripe for a new kind of resistance, one that didn't rely on brute force but on the unexpected. Dr. Evelyn Knight, a renowned scientist specializing in quantum computing, found herself in the middle of a top-secret briefing with military commanders and tech experts. The air in the war room was thick with tension as she scanned the alien ships visible on live feeds, their dark shapes hovering over the world's capitals. But her mind was elsewhere, on something far more crucial. The Xalrathi had made a fatal mistake, one they hadn't even noticed. "There's a pattern in their communications," she said, breaking the silence. "A flaw in the encryption. It's subtle, but it's there. If we can access it, we can disrupt their command network." The room went quiet. A general leaned forward, his face worn with exhaustion. "You're suggesting we hack into their system?" "I am," Dr. Knight replied, her voice steady. "But it's going to take everything we've got. We'll need to act fast before they realize it's there." Major Brian Caldwell, a decorated soldier turned strategist, crossed his arms. "We're talking about an enemy with technology beyond our wildest dreams. You think we can outsmart them?" Dr. Knight looked at him, unwavering. "Outsmarting them is exactly what we need to do. They've underestimated us. That's their mistake. It wasn't long before an unlikely group came together. A team of hackers, scientists, and former soldiers, united by the belief that Earth's future lay not in cowering beneath the alien ships, but in defying them. As the days ticked down toward the Xal'Rathi's deadline, this ragtag crew worked around the clock, developing a plan to infiltrate the alien fleet's technology and turn it against them. Meanwhile, the public response to the invasion began to shift. What had started as panic slowly transformed into something else. Defiance. Local militias and underground groups began to form, each offering whatever they could to help. But it wasn't just physical resistance that was needed. Humanity's most powerful weapon wasn't a rifle or a tank. It was the ability to think differently, to approach problems with a unique perspective. The Xal'Rathi had come to conquer a planet of primitives. What they didn't know was that the so-called primitives had already begun planning the unthinkable. Every person, from the scientist in her lab to the soldier in a remote outpost, felt the same pulse of determination. They would not surrender. The clock was ticking, but for the first time since the invasion began, there was a spark of hope. The Xal'Rathi might be formidable, but they had forgotten one crucial detail. Humans were capable of extraordinary things when faced with impossible odds. As the deadline drew nearer, the world waited in uneasy silence, but behind closed doors, humanity's response was already underway. Dr. Knight's team worked tirelessly, tapping into every available resource, assembling a network of hackers and military minds. The plan they were crafting was unorthodox, but in their desperation, they realized they had no other choice but to use their enemy's own overconfidence against them. The first strike was subtle, a small disruption, just enough to get the aliens' attention. A broadcast, meant to be a routine update from the Xal'Rathi fleet, was intercepted and replaced with a series of chaotic signals, static, scrambling sounds, and garbled transmissions. To the Xal'Rathi, it seemed like nothing more than a technical glitch. They assumed their systems had suffered a minor fault, nothing that would slow their progress. But the humans weren't stopping there. As the Xal'Rathi dealt with the confusion, Caldwell's military group launched a series of decoy attacks across various locations around the world. These weren't large-scale offensives. They were calculated diversions, small, rapid assaults meant to draw the alien forces' attention without risking real conflict. No one expected any of these skirmishes to succeed. The goal was simply to draw the Xal'Rathi into believing that Earth's forces were scattered, disorganized, and desperate. On the surface, the alien leaders were right. Their forces were far superior. Yet beneath the surface, a quiet game of manipulation was being played. The Xal'Rathi believed that humanity's resistance was a chaotic, last-ditch effort, easily crushed under their superior firepower. Their tactical minds saw Earth's military as nothing more than a nuisance, a distraction that could be ignored until the deadline expired. Meanwhile, Dr. Knight's team, working in the shadows, had made significant progress. They had located the alien backdoor in their encrypted network, the one vulnerable spot that would give them access to the entire fleet's communication systems. With this, humanity had the potential to create massive confusion among the Xal'Rathi ranks, if they could just get it right. But the humans were careful. They knew that if the Xal'Rathi realized they were being toyed with, they would retaliate with devastating force. So they kept things low-key. Each move made was calculated to leave the aliens deeper into their false assumptions. Each decoy attack, each minor glitch, served to further convince the Xal'Rathi that humanity was weak and disjointed. From the outside, it appeared as though the world was on the brink of collapse. But beneath the surface, something remarkable was happening. Humanity was learning how to play the Xal'Rathi's game, and they were doing it better than the aliens ever expected. With every passing hour, Earth's resistance grew bolder. And the Xal'Rathi, still underestimating the humans, were about to fall right into their trap. Here's the continuation of Part 4. The Tournament Proposal. The Xal'Rathi had grown impatient. Their fleet, so vast and imposing just days ago, now seemed to be shifting nervously in orbit. Earth's resistance wasn't crushing them in battle, but it was forcing them into a position they hadn't anticipated. Uncertainty. Their once unshakable confidence was beginning to fray at the edges. It was clear that the humans weren't as easily defeated as they had assumed. In a rare moment of diplomacy, a human leader stepped forward. A woman named Isabella Reyes, a former negotiator turned crisis manager. She was known for her sharp mind and even sharper tongue. With the Tsalarathi pressing for an immediate surrender, Reyes was called upon to make a desperate pitch, a last-ditch effort to avoid total destruction. The transmission was broadcast to the alien fleet. "We propose a challenge, a contest, to prove which species truly deserves to command the future of this world." The Tsalarathi commander, a towering figure named Turax, received the message with a mix of amusement and suspicion. To him, the human's suggestion was nothing more than a pathetic plea for mercy. But that's exactly what they were counting on. Isabella continued, her voice calm yet firm. "A series of tests, strength, intellect, strategy, your best against ours. If we win, you leave Earth in peace. If you win, humanity surrenders. There is no trickery, no sabotage, just pure competition. What say you?" The Tsalrathi's first instinct was to laugh. "A tournament." Turax sneered, his voice booming over the transmission. "You think we, the greatest warriors of the galaxy, will waste our time on such nonsense?" But as the silence hung in the air, something shifted. The Tsalarathi were not known for their patience, but they were driven by an insatiable need to prove their superiority. They saw this as an opportunity to crush the humans in a way that would cement their dominance for good. Turax, with a sinister smile, agreed. The challenge was accepted. "We will indulge your pathetic request," Turax declared. "Prepare your best. The outcome will be your destruction, and you will regret ever daring to defy us." But what Turax failed to realize was that the humans weren't offering a challenge based on raw power. They were offering something far more dangerous, a test of their creativity, their ability to outthink and outmaneuver. And in the days that followed, humanity's leaders scrambled to select their champions, not the strongest soldiers or the most powerful warriors, but those with the sharpest minds, the most inventive spirits, and the ability to adapt to anything that Tsalarathi could throw at them. The countdown to the tournament began. Earth had one last chance to prove that it was more than just a helpless planet awaiting conquest. That Tsalarathi had been foolish enough to underestimate humanity, and they were about to pay the price. The tournament began with a sense of tense anticipation. Earth's champions, chosen for their ingenuity and creativity, rather than brute strength, gathered in a makeshift war room, their faces illuminated by screens displaying the alien arena. They had no illusions. Defeating the Tsalarathi in this contest would not be about raw power or firepower. It would be about outwitting them at every turn. The first challenge was announced, a complex game of strategy, a simulated battle designed to test the minds of both species. The rules were simple on the surface. Control more territory than your opponent using a mix of resources, deception, and planning. But the Tsalarathi, known for their military precision and aggression, expected to crush the humans in this game of tactics. Their confidence was palpable. Dr. Evelyn Knight, one of humanity's best minds, had been chosen to represent Earth in this intellectual battle. Sitting in front of a holographic board that displayed an intricate grid of moving pieces, she studied her opponent across the arena, a Tsalarathi strategist named Kizura. Kizura was renowned for her cold, calculating nature. Her kind had conquered entire star systems by outsmarting weaker races. She was supremely confident that she would dismantle this primitive challenge in no time. As the game began, Kizura took the lead almost immediately, quickly securing the center of the map and outmaneuvering Evelyn with swift, aggressive moves. The Tsalrathi's approach was direct and forceful, controlling vast swaths of territory with sheer speed. Humanity's strategy, on the other hand, was methodical, slower, more deliberate. It seemed like an uphill battle from the start, and on the outside, the spectators held their breath. unsure of how long the humans could hold on. But Evelyn wasn't fazed. As the game progressed, she began to counterattack with subtle moves that Kizera failed to anticipate. Every piece Kizera placed was met with a counter. Small, seemingly inconsequential moves that slowly started to erode the Salrathi's dominance. Human ingenuity, honed over centuries of survival against overwhelming odds, began to show its strength. The turning point came when Evelyn used a combination of decoy strategies, creating the illusion of a major offensive while secretly positioning her pieces for a devastating strike. Kizera, confident in her victory, committed to an aggressive expansion, believing she had already won. But it was exactly what Evelyn had hoped for. With a quick series of calculated moves, she flipped the game on its head, capturing Kizera's most valuable assets in a single stroke. The Salrathi strategist stared at the holographic board, stunned. In mere minutes, the humans had turned her well-planned strategy into dust. The crowd watching from both sides gasped as Evelyn Nike claimed victory in the first round. The Salrathi were visibly shaken. They had expected to dominate, but instead, they had been outsmarted by a species they thought incapable of such finesse. Evelyn didn't celebrate, but the glimmer of pride in her eyes was undeniable. The humans had won the first battle, and the message was clear: intelligence could defeat brute strength. Kizera, fuming with disbelief, made no attempt to hide her frustration. "This is not over," she growled, but deep inside, she knew the humans were capable of far more than she had ever imagined. The tournament had become something far more than just a series of challenges. It had become a statement. With each round, humanity's champions were rewriting the narrative of their species. No longer were the Salrathi smug in their belief of superiority. Their pride, once unshakable, had been cracked open, revealing uncertainty beneath. The humans weren't just surviving. They were thriving in ways that Salrathi had never imagined. But with only one challenge left, the stakes had never been higher. The final test was set to be the ultimate measure of both mind and body, a gauntlet of endurance, survival, and pure willpower. The arena, now transformed into a deadly maze of traps, shifting landscapes, and bizarre obstacles, would test not just the physical strength of the contestants, but their ability to adapt to any situation, no matter how bizarre or lethal. Every step forward could lead to victory or demise. The final challenge was a race against time, and that Salrathi had chosen their fiercest warrior for this test. Jorka, a battle-hardened champion known for her relentless determination and ruthless cunning. Earth's representative was the one person who had already become a symbol of humanity's resilience, Major Brian Caldwell. He had defied all expectations before, and now he was about to face his greatest test yet. The moment the challenge began, Jorka took off like a force of nature, charging through the maze with unrelenting speed. Her movements were quick and calculated, and she appeared to have an instinctive understanding of the arena. With every corner she turned, she was prepared, dodging traps, climbing walls, and taking every advantage of the deadly terrain. Caldwell, however, did not rush. He understood that this was not a race to the finish line, but a test of endurance. He carefully navigated the same deadly landscape, not simply relying on his strength or speed, but on his tactical mind. Each turn was a calculated decision. Each obstacle was an opportunity to outthink his opponent. Jorka was fast, but Caldwell had learned to wait for the right moment. As the two neared a particularly deadly trap, a section of the arena filled with spikes and shifting platforms, Jorka sprinted ahead, confident that she would be the first to reach the next checkpoint. But Caldwell, ever vigilant, noticed a subtle misalignment in the shifting platforms. With a quick calculation, he made a sharp turn, taking a hidden path that Jorka had missed. He reached the next checkpoint just as Jorka realized her mistake. In a flash of frustration, she tried to catch up, but the maze was relentless. The terrain seemed to fight against her every move, while Caldwell's every step seemed deliberate, avoiding the traps and obstacles with uncanny precision. As the final stretch approached, both competitors were near exhaustion. Jorka, desperate to reclaim the lead, lunged forward with a burst of speed. But Caldwell, his focus unbroken, moved with the grace of someone who had seen this moment before. He crossed the finish line first, narrowly outpacing Jorka, who collapsed behind him in defeat. The crowd erupted into a stunned silence. Caldwell had done it again, outsmarting, outlasting, and outmaneuvering an enemy who had been too sure of their victory. The humans had taken yet another step toward proving their worth. Jorka, panting heavily, stood up and looked at her fallen opponent. She could hardly believe it, but there was no denying it now. The humans had won. In the face of everything the Xalrethi had thrown at them, humanity had endured. The final challenge had been completed, and the silence that followed was deafening. No one had expected this outcome, not the Xalrethi, who had believed the humans to be weak, nor the humans themselves, who had fought against impossible odds to prove they could outwit and outlast their would-be conquerors. But here they were, standing victorious. Major Brian Caldwell stood at the finish line, his chest heaving with exhaustion, but his face was calm. He looked across the arena, meeting the eyes of the Xalrethi who had been so certain of their superiority. And in that moment, the truth hit them all. Humanity had outsmarted them. Not through brute force, not through technology, but through sheer determination, intelligence, and the ability to adapt in ways that Xalrethi had never considered. The Xalrethi commander, Taraxis, stood at the head of his fleet, his fists clenched in frustration. He had underestimated humanity from the very beginning, dismissing them as weak primitives. But now, the truth was undeniable. Earth had earned its place in the galaxy. The humans had not only survived, they had triumphed. The Xalrethi, once so sure of their victory, now had to contend with the fact that their pride had cost them dearly. Isabella Reyes, the human negotiator who had proposed the tournament, stood next to Caldwell as he caught his breath. Her eyes were focused, but there was a flicker of relief in her gaze. The Xalrethi had been offered a chance to prove their superiority, and they had failed. There would be no invasion, no destruction. The humans had made their stand and won. Tarax's voice echoed through the broadcast, but there was no anger this time, only grudging respect. We acknowledge the skill and resilience of your species. The tournament has shown us that we underestimated you. You are not the weaklings we thought you were. Earth is yours to defend. The declaration was more than just a concession. It was a surrender. The Xalrethi had no choice but to honor the terms of the tournament, leaving Earth in peace. They had been bested, and their pride would not allow them to break their word. For the first time since their arrival, the humans had not been forced into submission. They had taken control of their own fate. Across the world, people celebrated. What had begun as a desperate struggle for survival had turned into a victory against the most powerful force in the galaxy. The unity of humanity, its resourcefulness, and its refusal to bow down to the impossible had won the day. Dr. Evelyn Knight, Major Caldwell, and the others who had fought so hard stood together, knowing that they had done more than just save their world. They had proven something far more important, that no matter how powerful the enemy, humanity's strength lay not in its technology or weapons, but in its ability to think, adapt, and never give up. The Xalrethi fleet began to retreat, their ships disappearing into the vastness of space, leaving Earth behind. The battle was over, but the legacy of humanity's victory would last forever. Earth had won, against all odds. The final challenge had been completed, and the silence that followed was deafening. No one had expected this outcome, not the Xalrethi, who had believed the humans to be weak, nor the humans themselves, who had fought against impossible odds to prove they could outwit and outlast their would-be conquerors. But here they were, standing victorious. Major Brian Caldwell stood at the finish line, his chest heaving with exhaustion, but his face was calm. He looked across the arena, meeting the eyes of the Xalrethi who had been so certain of their superiority, and in that moment, The truth hit them all. Humanity had outsmarted them. Not through brute force, not through technology, but through sheer determination, intelligence, and the ability to adapt in ways that Salrathi had never considered. The Salrathi commander, Taraxis, stood at the head of his fleet, his fists clenched in frustration. He had underestimated humanity from the very beginning, dismissing them as weak primitives. But now, the truth was undeniable. Earth had earned its place in the galaxy. The humans had not only survived, they had triumphed. The Salrathi, once so sure of their victory, now had to contend with the fact that their pride had cost them dearly. Isabella Reyes, the human negotiator who had proposed the tournament, stood next to Caldwell as he caught his breath. Her eyes were focused, but there was a flicker of relief in her gaze. That Salrathi had been offered a chance to prove their superiority, and they had failed. There would be no invasion, no destruction. The humans had made their stand and won. Tarax's voice echoed through the broadcast, but there was no anger this time, only grudging respect. We acknowledge the skill and resilience of your species. The tournament has shown us that we underestimated you. You are not the weaklings we thought you were. Earth is yours to defend. The declaration was more than just a concession. It was a surrender. The Salrathi had no choice but to honor the terms of the tournament, leaving Earth in peace. They had been bested, and their pride would not allow them to break their word. For the first time since their arrival, the humans had not been forced into submission. They had taken control of their own fate. Across the world, people celebrated. What had begun as a desperate struggle for survival had turned into a victory against the most powerful force in the galaxy. The unity of humanity, its resourcefulness, and its refusal to bow down to the impossible had won the day. Dr. Evelyn Knight, Major Caldwell, and the others who had fought so hard stood together, knowing that they had done more than just save their world. They had proven something far more important, that no matter how powerful the enemy, humanity's strength lay not in its technology or weapons, but in its ability to think, adapt, and never give up. The Salrathi fleet began to retreat, their ships disappearing into the vastness of space, leaving Earth behind. The battle was over, but the legacy of humanity's victory would last forever. Earth had won, against all odds.